Is Obama the Antichrist? Is he a forerunner of the Antichrist? And I'm asking these questions, sincerely. There are a lot of people in the nation right now that believe that he either is or that he is a spirit of the Antichrist that is actually paving the way for the coming of the man of sin. Now I've really put you on the spot. Where are we at, Bill?
Well, he doesn't really meet the biblical descriptions. Now, it's interesting that Newsweek did in November of last year, an article saying, is Obama the Antichrist? The point is this. No, I don't believe Obama's the Antichrist, and I'll give you a litany of reasons why not. First of all, he isn't from the source of origin of where Daniel 9:26 says the Antichrist will come. He comes out of the people who destroy the city and the sanctuary. Well, the city was Jerusalem. The sanctuary was the second Jewish temple. That was in 70 A.D., and that was the Roman. So he has to come out of the Roman Empire, the revived Roman Empire. So, no, I don't believe he meets that description. But the point of the matter is that the humanity is concerned. There's this fever pitch of apocalyptic tenor in humanity. They wouldn't be asking 20 years ago, if Ronald Reagan was the Antichrist. Right. 9/11's happened. As we turned into this century, Tom, you have to look at the events that have happened. We've had the September 11th scenario that happened. We've got a whole litany of things that have just come down and almost evidence the fact that the world hourglass has made its final turn. And, so this is what got humanity concerned. We've had that tsunami that hit. Back, let me just think about a couple of these things. We had the tsunami in December of 2004. It was triggered by a 9.1 earthquake, and of course Christ said in the end times, in Matthew 24, verses 7 and 8, there'll be earthquakes, and then Luke, he said great earthquakes. That was in the Indian Ocean. This is just this decade. The turn of the century killed 225,000 people. You had Hurricane Katrina, the most costly American disaster in its history. The financial crisis. This has all been happening in just this decade. The major banking systems, you stockpile upon that our war in Afghanistan since October of 2001, our Operation Iraqi Freedom, which Obama can't seem to get out of since March of 2003, the subprime lending crisis of 2005, the 34-day conflict in July of 2006 with Israel and Hezbollah we talked about earlier, the Russian invasion of Georgia in 2000.
Well, Bill, how does the Antichrist emerge on the world scene amidst the backdrop of all these world-changing events you're talking about, including what is developing right now in the Middle East?
Well, specifically relative to the Middle East, that's an important question because in light of these Israeli war prophecies that are about to happen, right now the international community is extremely concerned about Iran and Israel and this whole situation, like I talked about. Could gas go up to $300 a barrel? We're trying as a world to get back into some kind of financial stability. Bernanke recently said, hey, it may feel like the recession a little bit longer, but it looks like the recession is kind of over at this point. And of course, more people are more concerned about Acorn than they are paying attention to what Bernanke's saying anymore, because we're living in this kind of unique environment. But when it comes to the world is worried about what could happen in the Middle East now. What I'm suggesting what's going to happen in the Middle East is just amazing what's going to start happening over there in the wars that the Bible foretells. And the world is going to be clamoring for some sort of peace and stability and safety. And that's one of the things that the Antichrist offers to the world is peace and safety. And he actually confirms a covenant with Israel in Daniel 9:27. It's a 7-year false covenant to try to bring stability into the Middle East with an Israel that is, if you understand how these wars play out, Psalm 83 plays out, and the Israeli Defense Forces just has a massive victory. Ezekiel 38 and 39 occurs, and this is huge. Imagine this, Tom. This would be like if Canada, America, and Mexico said, let's get together and go against New Jersey. Mm-hmm. That's the size and scope of the Ezekiel 38 and 39 Gog of Magog invasion coming against Israel. Now, I don't believe it'll be the tiny Israel of today when they come after them. I think it'll be a much larger Israel after the aftermath of Psalm 83. But they're going to come against them, and even though the Israeli Defense Forces will be strong, and they'll have taken over some of the arsenals of the Arabs that are defeated in Psalm 83, they will be no match for Russia's entourage. But they don't have to be, because Ezekiel 38 and 39 talk about God divinely defeating that, not the Israeli Defense Forces. In fact, the Israeli Defense Forces play hardly any role in that.
The 7-year peace covenant with Israel. For the last 61 years, most pulpits And I know because I was a pastor for 25 of those years, we've been teaching that the Mideast Peace Pact finally will bring peace between the Jews and the Arabs. That somehow it's going to protect the Jews from continued Arab attempts to destroy the Jewish state. In light of everything you've been saying this evening, and of the fact that the Israeli wars may occur prior, it would seem that what you're saying alters almost the purpose for this false Mideast Peace Pact, wouldn't it? And as I understand it, there's just a significant amount of discussion and controversy going on tonight in the chat room. Look, give me an answer to the 7-year peace covenant with Israel and where this is going to take us.
Okay, well, first of all, you're absolutely right. The general teachings on that have been over the past 6 decades that this will be a peace covenant finally between Israel and the Arabs, and more importantly, Israel and the Palestinians, their immediate foes. They believe that this will be a 7-year covenant confirmed by the Antichrist with Israel. It will finally protect Israel from the Arabs. But in light of the fact that Psalm 83 is about to occur, in my estimation, and Israel is going to win that, there will be no political brokering for peace in the Middle East. This will be achieved militarily. So this is not necessarily, in my estimation, what the content of that false covenant is going to say. Now, for those people who are not real familiar with it, they need to maybe pick it up in Daniel 9, verses 26 and 27, and that's where they can find about this false covenant, and they can also pick it up in Isaiah 28, verses 15 and 18, where Isaiah actually calls it a covenant with death and agreement with Sheol, which would be, hell or Hades. That's the Hebrew word. So what we're talking about is a very important covenant in the end. It's going to have something to do with stabilizing the Middle East region, which I believe will be entirely different than we see it today. I believe that the Atlas Company should be rezoning and being prepared to make the new maps because they're going to be changing fairly soon, and that the world is going to be saying, we need to bring peace to what's going on over here. Look what just happened. Israel took out the Arabs. Russia and Iran came down, and some divine Old Testament duty was dealt against them by the God of the Jews. And this Antichrist is going to come on the scene amidst that backdrop of an Israel that is growing, and the way Israel appears to be responding to all this victory and stuff that's going on is to be claiming promises given to Abraham, taking over more land, saying, hey, this is our land. They're going to want to rebuild their temple. They've already got their priests, the temple instruments are already implemented. They're already searching out the Levites through the genealogies as best they can find them. Of course, most of those were destroyed in 70 AD with the destruction of the Jewish temple. I mean, they are going to be wanting to re-implement the Mosaic law. And the Antichrist is going to sign this false covenant with them. And then in the middle of it, it says he goes into the temple, which will exist at that time, and he does what's called the abomination of desolation, spoken of Daniel 9. It's also in Matthew 24. In other words, he brings an end to the sacrificial system the Jews are doing at that point, and at that point he starts declaring himself to be above all God. He blasphemes God, and so on and so forth. And he's got all kinds of different characteristics that I don't know if we can talk about those tonight, but this is the point. Amidst that backdrop, Israel's response will be to re-implement the Mosaic laws, create the animal sacrificial system again, and try to say, we want this land, we want these rights, we want to have our freedom of worship the way we used to. Meanwhile, amidst that backdrop, you have a harlot system of Revelation 17, which if people want to know what that is, I highly recommend Jim Tetlow's book called The Queen of All. That kind of religious system that comes up that's drunk with the blood of the saints, and the Antichrist rides on that for a while, and then he ultimately, with 10 kings, destroys that. So, I mean, we're getting to a point where this all gets too deep and too much to cover, but that's about to happen.
Yeah, but just a second ago, you mentioned all these characteristics of the Antichrist. I want to ask your take on the Assyrian Antichrist. WorldNet Daily, as you know, we do a lot with them. Their number one selling book over there for the last month was on the subject of an Assyrian Antichrist, but as you know, I know you're very aware, there's a lot of scholars that dispute this whole idea of an Assyrian Antichrist. I want to get your take on that.
Well, it's a paradigm shift in Antichrist thinking, to start with that. Most people do not agree with this Islamic Antichrist model. It's being propagated primarily by Joel Richardson, Waleed Shoebat, and a few others, and I respect those individuals. They're definitely very good at what they do. However, I don't believe that the Assyrian Antichrist model, which means an Islamic Antichrist, is going to exist, and I'll tell you why. Psalm 83 is going to be, those nations are going to be destroyed are predominantly Muslim. The Russian-Iranian invasion that comes in Ezekiel 38